Good afternoon to everyone who just joined us, both offline here in Lublin, in Galeria Biała, and also online. That's our second discussion today. Technical detail. We speak in English, but if you need a translation, there are devices. The whole discussion is translated into Polish. So please use the help there. So I use these few seconds to thank again to our hosts, to Galeria Biała in Lublin. They have us with this discussion within the project Ukraine Unmuted, and they also have the exhibition Ukrainian cross section just in these halls. In Galeria, so those lucky of you who are here offline, please use the opportunity to visit the exhibition. So the whole project, Ukraine Unmuted, is organized by the Institute for Cultural Strategy from Lviv, Ukraine, and it was also supported by the International Renaissance Foundation from Ukraine, by Ukrainian Cultural Foundation, Український Культурний фонд, Ukrainian Cultural Foundation, and by Centrum Kultury in Lublin, and also by Верменська 35, which is the NGO also from Lviv. So we have a kind of Lviv-Lublin cooperation right here. And I'm also very happy because we have quite a panel with five guests, and not all of them know each other. I'm very happy I have opportunity to introduce them to each other, and actually people who came from different places, both literally and geographically. And I will try to introduce them formally very shortly. And maybe I will do it just before I give them the floor. And our topic today is quite broad, and a lot of words have been said about it during the last year and a half. But I don't think we are here to just to say nice things to each other and talk about how great we all are, but rather about our experiences and reflect on that. Maybe not the obvious things. So the topic is solidarity. You know, one of my colleagues said recently that Ukrainian word for victory, which is перемога, should be the international word. You know, should come to other languages. And I think that solidarity is a very special word for Poland, and Polish word solidarność should also be an international word. And again, I use this opportunity to thank you all here in this room and also outside of this room, all our friends from Poland, to thank you for Solidarność. And from this point, I will pass the floor to our American friend, who actually spent a lot of time in Poland recently, not only in Ukraine, but in Poland. And she came from the United States. Tamar Jacobi, she is the president of organization which called Opportunity America. That's a non-profit that deals actually with American problems of economic mobility in the United States. The problems we maybe not really see from where we are, from our place. And Tamar, maybe you would tell us about this a lot and your story actually, how you came here.
Great. Well, so I'm Tamar Jacobi. Thank you, Oksana. Thank you, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's great to be here. I'm an American journalist and policy thinker, and Oksana asked me to do something to talk about my personal story, which is something I really hate to do. But out of deference to Oksana, because we all love Oksana, I'm going to try to answer 3 questions that trace back to our topic of solidarity. Why I came to this part of the world in March 2022, why I stayed, why I'm still here, and what I find most compelling about the Ukrainian fight and the Ukrainian cause, what's really holding me here in solidarity. So on February 23rd, 2022, as Oksana said, I was running a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., focused on issues of policy. How do we help working class Americans get into the middle class? And I was following the news from Ukraine, but I didn't have any particular connection to Ukraine. I don't have people from here, anything like that. And for what it's worth, I'm not the kind of person who usually volunteers. I don't pick up trash in my neighborhood. I don't donate money to good causes. I'm not particularly altruistic. But I read a newspaper story about a man from the Netherlands who drove to the Polish border to help refugees. And something about it just grabbed me. And I said, if he can do it, I can do it. And I made a plan to come to Krakow for 3 weeks. And the idea was that I was going to help, I was going to ladle soup and unpack boxes and do the things that one does, that many people came to do, important work for refugees. But I got here, and people said to me, I was working in the Jewish Community Center in Krakow, which many of you may know, wonderful little institution, and the people said to me, you know, you'd be really bad at ladling soup, and you'd probably be even worse at unpacking boxes. You're a writer. We need you to be writing about what's going on here. And so, you know, that has turned into 2 years, nearly 2 years of my life, and really a major pivot. So I've been here, you know, all that time since March 2022. I think I've been home twice. I still call it home. I don't know why. I now live in Kyiv, and I run a little center for a Washington, D.C. nonprofit. And I focus on what I think of as nation building. That's not a popular word in the US anymore, but the way I think about it is that winning the war is essential, winning the war is hard, winning the war is really important, but winning the peace is going to be as interesting and hard and important in Ukraine, and those are kind of the issues that I'm interested in focusing on. So that's why I came in the first place. Now, question number 2, why have I stayed? And before I answer that, I just want to say, and I'm trying to introduce a note of kind of skepticism here, you'll notice all along. It's never really clear to me that writers help, or that, you know, how one helps as a writer, right? Here's a big social problem. Am I really helping? I'm not sure. And certainly from the beginning, I had kind of mixed motives. You know, I did want to help where I could. I came thinking I would ladle soup. But I also, you know, I have to admit, I wanted to witness something that I thought was really important, a big pivot in European history. And, you know, the way I talked about it then, I don't know if I would still talk about it this way, but I sort of said, well, there was the Cold War, and then there was the post-Cold War, and now there's going to be the post-Cold War, and that's what kind of the big full-scale invasion is introducing. And I thought, you know, that's a change of, you know, one of the biggest changes of my lifetime. I want to come and see it. So yes, I was thinking about helping, but my motives were also always kind of mixed. And again, we're trying to get at what solidarity means, right? And what empathy means. And so I spent a couple of months, when I first got here, I spent a couple of months in Krakow asking refugees about their experience of the full-scale invasion, and asking, and maybe more important, listening. And I ended up writing about it, but at the time what I said to myself is they seemed very eager to talk. They almost seemed to need to talk. These were people who had just come out. You know, they were just gotten off the train that week, many of them. And I told myself, well, maybe I'm helping. I'm listening. So, you know, was I writing? Was I helping? Was it solidarity? Was it something else? I don't, you know, hard to untangle. Then later, when I started to write about Ukrainian civil society and civilian resilience, I told myself, well, their stories will help drive American aid. So, you know, again, maybe I'm helping. And, you know, you stretch, you try to explain yourself to yourself. And then, most recently, I've spent a lot of time thinking about Ukrainian efforts to push back corruption. And again, I say, well, maybe this will be important ammunition for the friends of Ukraine in Washington and in Brussels who need to answer charges that Ukraine is corrupt. So again, you know, maybe I'm helping. But honestly, you know, I have to say I'm not sure. And my motives haven't changed. At least half of my motives aren't really about helping at all. It's not really about solidarity. And I think to call it solidarity, you know, we all like to think we're good people and we're empathetic and we're, you know, but I think you have to be careful. You have to tease the words out a little bit and be careful not to misuse it, and certainly be careful not to flatter yourself or to you know, think what you're doing is important. But, you know, again, so for me it's about solidarity, but it's also about witnessing something that I think is really important and trying to understand it and trying to help other people understand it. So that's enough about me. I want to close with just a couple of words about what is it about Ukraine and Ukrainians that I find so compelling, and again, you know, kind of why I'm still here. And it starts with the things that captured the world's attention, all the world's attention in the first days, right? You know, when Zelensky said, I don't need ammunition, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. You know, the resistance and the resilience and the determination and the resourcefulness and the courage. You know, those are all amazing things, and that enough is a reason like to stay and want to tell the story. But for me, it's also a little bit more than that. When I kind of explain it to myself, it's really about people who are focused on something bigger than themselves, right? Not just their personal lives, but something aspirational and collective that's bigger than their personal lives. You know, everyone I know in America, all they care about is their personal lives. You know, the idea of something really aspirational and collective, that's very inspiring. Number two, people willing to do anything, really, and sacrifice anything for this collective aspirational idea. Like how, you know, you take one amazing thing and then you kind of double it, willing to do anything for it. And then the third thing, and multiplying it again, is the collective aspirational thing that people are focused on is something I also hold very dear. Western political values, right? So democracy and freedom and tolerance and transparency and a market economy that can deliver better standards. What people are focused on and caring about and willing to sacrifice for is something I hold very dear. So I don't have to preach to any of you about those values, but, you know, I think last word is when I go home and I try to explain what I'm doing here to my friends who, you know, look at me kind of like I'm crazy, right? Like, what are you doing there? Why are you living in the city, you know, that gets shelled every couple of days? And I say, well, you know, oddly, it's life-affirming. Like, yes, you know, the war is awful. Yes, Kyiv can be a daunting and difficult place to live. Yes, the weight of the suffering I've seen sometimes feels kind of unbearable. But in the end, somehow it's inspiring and uplifting and really life-affirming. So that's why I came, that's why I'm here. I'm really glad to be part of this panel talking about solidarity.
Thank you, Tala. Thank you. And I already what came later. Maybe you noticed some changes now. And Edwin Bendik, I didn't introduce you because you know, we in Poland. I relax. I know that everyone knows you in Poland. Edwin Bendik is the head of Stefan Batory Foundation here in Warsaw, and also well-known journalist author in Poland, and one of the I think, famous researchers of Polish society and especially Polish internet, Polish journey to the online world. So, Edwin, I would ask you to share your observation during these years.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Oksana, for the invitation and for this question. So we are still looking answer for it, because everything what happened then after 24th of February and next days were so unexpected. So when you look at sociological surveys done before this full-scale invasion, so we were afraid that Poland is stepping down into anomaly. It was because of pandemic and because of crash of mass protests which we had in the autumn of 2020 against the anti-abortion law. They were crushed by police, and they were also neglected by democratic establishment. Young people who were involved were really disappointed, and all of that, when you get this together, so we were afraid that something wrong is going on with us. When Poles asked in November of 2021, how do you think about your neighbors? Would they help others, or are they thinking about themselves? So almost 80% were answering that we are thinking about ourselves, that nobody was expected to help others. Then we could see what happened on the 24th of February. And I don't only mean this mass mobilization of people, but much more interesting and important happened. So we are in Lublin, so Lublin is a specific place which showed what I mean. So just a couple of hours after the war began, it was not only mass mobilization, but civic society organization, which were very, let's say, working on the issue for many years, get together and established a solidarity committee together with local authorities just to organize all this help, because it was not enough to answer spontaneously. We needed infrastructure. The state was not operating at that time. For almost 2 weeks, the state institutions were almost absent, didn't know how to react. So we were reacting, organizing ourselves, and it was, I would say, very important discovery that we are able to do this. Not only in Lublin, the same was in Przemyśl, the same was in Rzeszów, the same was in Chełm. So I mean cities which are close to the border, but then Krakow, Warsaw, Gdańsk, Wrocław, everybody, all these structures emerged, and so we realized, in spite of the proud of ourselves, that we are ready to do this. We discovered that we are something we believe that is impossible to build. So I mean civil society in terms of abilities to organize, to build institutions, to support them, and also to believe in some values, but also to be ready to share private resources to maintain these institutions and values, because it was very important that in these first days, and until now, I would say, a lot of help is being delivered by private persons who still are being engaged in this. So it was something new but unexpected in scale, not unexpected in as a possibility, because we could see this kind of mobilization in 2020 when pandemics began. So it was the same. The state institutions were very chaotic, almost absent, and we had to organize ourselves to help elders, for example, who couldn't go outdoor to buy things and something like that. So we organized all this help on our own. So we knew that we could do this, but then the beginning of war showed that we can also do this on so huge scale and coordinate these activities to join different segments of society, different groups, different skills, different resources to give an adequate answer to the problems. So it was very important discovery, and I think that because of this discovery, because of self-realization we have what happened a week ago during elections, once again. So unexpected mass mobilizations to push away the political regime most Poles didn't like, we must admit. It was, of course, something strange situation that determined minority kept power in Poland, who were not welcomed by the majority. But finally, because of this ability for mass mobilization, so we finally push away this regime. But I am pretty sure that we wouldn't do this without our experiences from 2022, 2020, and earlier on mass protests in 2016 and the other days. So it was this last 8 years, I would say, it was time of kind of a silent revolution when we discovered ourselves as a civil society.
Okay, thank you, Edwin. Thank you very much. Again, we will come back to that, and for this moment, I would ask Anya Lazar, who is curator, and now she works again as a curator of the international artistic program in the organization that called Gdańsk, the City of Literature. But Anya also does many other things, again as a curator, as an author, and as a former diplomat. Actually, that's why my question, because we know each other for many years, back from the years when Anya Lazar worked with Polish Institute in Kiev. It was the beginning of the 2011 and up to the Euromaidan revolution. So from our Ukrainian perspective, that was like dark years, because back then those was the year when almost no one believed in us. Even I would say that few people in Ukraine believed in Ukraine, because that was so pessimistic atmosphere and no prospects for some bright future. But Anya was one of those people who actually believed in Ukraine and did a lot for Ukrainian art scene in those years. I would even say that Anya did more than the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture back then. But that's very dubious compliment, because it's very hard to do less than it was. So, but. So anyway, Anya back then actually facilitated contemporary Ukrainian art, and she was our hope in many years. So I would like you to share your reflections. How was the perception of your perception of Ukraine in those years, and how do you see what we have now? Do you see any connection?
Oksana, thank you so much. I'm red outside and inside of myself. Your kind words are really something very, very pleasant. I think I didn't deserve so much attention, but I'm deeply grateful for the invitation to such a important panel with such a great panelists from all over the world. It's an honor for me. Thank you. And I'm also super happy to see all of you. A lot of my friends are sitting in front of me in person, but also I see the work of art of people who are my friends. So when you ask me about the Ukrainian culture, it's really a very wide question for me. And it's hard to choose one topic where to start off. Maybe I should start from the picture of Katja Lipkind, who is in front of our eyes. Katja Lipkind is an artist who is from Kyiv, and now she is in Cyprus. She went there straight from Israel when she went together with Staś Turina straight from Wołomin, where do I live, because we spent a week together. And Katarina Lipkind is really amazing artist because she's also a curator. And one of the most important exhibitions I saw in Kyiv in the last few months was Once Upon a Time in the House of Hanenko. It's a very important museum of art in Kyiv that was partly distracted by the Russian missile. It's in the city center near the Shevchenko University and Park of Shevchenko, and these missiles broke the windows. It was a deeply lucky situation that no one died during this attack. But what was important for me in the situation a few months after this Russian attack on the Hanenko Museum on Ukraine and on Ukrainian culture, that Ukrainian artists, around like 15 of them, decided to take the reflection about the war situation, not only with depicting the crisis of war, but thinking about the long process of Ukrainian culture and the process of contradiction. Because from the one point of view, they were protecting the Museum of Hanenko, which is the museum established like in the end of 19th century, but deeply Sovietized. It's very important that Ukrainian culture right now, I do believe, is taking the reflection on a Soviet heritage. The Soviet heritage that haven't been reflected for the last 30 years. And only now this reflection is coming, like widely coming to the Ukrainian culture. And I am fascinated with this process because, as Oksana kindly said, I am observing Ukrainian culture for more than 20 years. I am a Ukrainian philologist, Polish philologist, art historian, so I'm like hard to say who am I. Maybe I'm kind of amoeba with the false legs who are going to the different direction. But in around like 2008, when first I was in Ukraine like around 2000, and when I was a student, I spent there a half year, and then I saw this like fascination of West, East. My jesteśmy zachodni, to jest jaki? Jesteśmy zachód, to jest east czy west? West. I was observing fascination of Western culture. Not critical, but deeply emotional fascination of Western culture. But later on, I saw that Ukrainians are asking the question, who are we? In this fascination, what is the role of artists after the collapse of Soviet Union and in the very beginning of like capitalistic and feudal revolution in Ukraine? Because I use the word feudal because it links us to the oligarchs in Ukraine, which are a very important figure in the sphere of contemporary culture. And they were like asking this question very gently, but right now these questions are like sharply asked. they are sharply asked not only about the Western culture and the way of Western culture, for example, introduce leftist discourses to the Ukrainian culture, but also to the Western culture which do not understand the heritage of Soviet Union. And this heritage of Soviet Union is the reason why Russia has the right to have this invasion on Ukraine. It's 610 days of invasion on Ukraine, and it is connected with the Soviet heritage that has never been reflected in the global reflection on the level that was devoted to the Nazi Germany. But it should be reflected. And I see this reflection in the frame of Ukrainian culture. So maybe I'm a bit chaotic, but what I try to say that I work with different people from Ukraine, with different topics of culture, with literature, with contemporary art, with performances, with dance. And people are bringing these questions again and again. Who are we in the long duration? Why are we in this situation? Who is responsible? Not only we are responsible, not only Russians are responsible, but the whole world that has a certain kind of agreement. It's impossible to live without a agreement, without jumping over certain questions, but still, if we will not see that utopia is also dangerous as Nazi utopia, we will not move forward. So it's, for me, like Ukrainian culture is like an experimental field. I see that people are trying to build new kind of institutions, but they are also fighting with the heritage of Soviet Union. They are fighting with the heritage of Ukrainian oligarchs who are very eager to eat the Ukrainian contemporary culture and to make this culture the element of the ornament of their capital. And I see the Ukrainian people who are ready not only to think about the contemporary situation, not only to make this culture, but also to fight. And around us are friends of mine. There is Yurko, who was fighting on the front, and he was wounded. And I'm so happy to understand that he's not only the culture maker, but also the person who is taking responsibility for what is going on. And I wanted to say that I am also not only curator or translator or writer, but I also work as a volunteer, and I believe that it is my personal responsibility to say something about this war and to be against this war as a person, not only as an institution. Thank you.
Thank you. No, don't put it back, because I have a short question for you. We had Katerina Botanova on the previous panel, and I guess she said very important thing about Ukrainian artists, this new contemporary artists, that they are very much socially engaged. They are on the field, on the side. They actually practice what we are talking today. They practice solidarity. And my question to you is, maybe we have again this different images of ourselves, because we have high hopes now. I guess I speak for most of us. We have high hopes that Ukrainian art and Ukrainian culture will show us to the world, so we can demonstrate what Ukraine is through art. And is it possible that we overestimate the art, but underestimate the artists as persons, as individuals?
Thank you very much for this question. I do believe that Ukrainian culture, both art and literature, is made by the people who are self-conscious, and they do understand that art, culture, contemporary culture, literature has wider scene than other disciplines. Maybe historians are in the competition with them. but still they do understand that they have a stage, and they do understand that they can work with this stage. So, for example, they are not only making the art, but they are also making political statements. For example, Ukraine should be the part of the NATO. I do believe that it's true. For example, we are behind us. We see the work of Dostlieva, Andriy and Lia Dostlieva. So this is the work about Solidar. But I invited Andriy Dostliev to Gdańsk, and what he did, he wrote a great essay about the appropriation of culture. About the Russian appropriation of Ukrainian culture, and he used the stage of art to present a very important, like, political statement of Ukrainian culture, that this culture needed space, that this culture has a different kind of interpretation of the world situation, and that actually, like, Russian culture is imperialistic, and it's on the every level of this culture, and it's also political. Like discourses of Ukrainian art and literature workers is about, like, giving the space to the nations that were subordinated by this empire, not to the empire and to the culture that built this this discourse of the domination. We have this great, like, Eva Thompson, probably you know her, Troubadours of Imperia from United States, who made this great decolonial interpretation of 19th century literature of Russia. But your question was, is it possible that we are underestimate Ukrainian...
The individuals, the artists as individuals, but overestimate art objects, for example, art as a medium to demonstrate us?
I believe that we are in the very specific moment of our global situation, that a lot of values are in the process of changing. Ukraine shows this process of changing inside its country. There are different, like, identity discourses. There are, like, different paths to build the institution, cultural institution, grassroots institution, and I think that literally global culture also should think again, what is it for, how do we look at the objects, how much money we can pay for what contemporary culture can be used. Because when I see, like, very high-priced picture on the walls of Ukrainian oligarch, I do not believe in this picture. I do believe in the capital that is behind of this picture. But when I see Ukrainian artist who says, I believe that our country should be protected by NATO, I do believe in this artist. So I think that we cannot underestimate it. We can be in the permanent process of critical thinking about our permanent crisis, global crisis, not only Ukrainian crisis.
Thank you, Anya. We are in the gallery right now, and the broader context of our discussion is, of course, art. And in art and in culture, every gesture, every move has very much significance and high expectations and meaning. And we, of course, have this high expectation, and when we are in this art context, we actually, I would say, we are hungry for these gestures of support, but it works a bit different in academic world, in academia. And we have actually two panelists here who are from academia, and Irina is actually belongs to both worlds, because I know Irina Starovoit as a poet, as a writer, but she is also a professor in Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. She teaches. And Andrew Wilson is a professor in the University College London, and Andrew, actually the head of Ukrainian studies, as Andrew knows Ukraine for years and for years, for 3 decades, I guess, or even more. And he's the author of several books about Ukraine. And now his next book is coming in December. Called Political Technology. In the title sounds very, I would say, Eastern for an English-speaking world, because there is nothing like that. I mean, nothing like this term actually in English. That was important from basically from Russian. I would ask Andrew now about his take on solidarity from where he sits, literally in London, in academia, in University College, and writing and researching Ukraine for years and for years.
Thank you, Oksana. Pleasure to be here in Lublin. Yeah, Oksana asked me to somehow link together the concepts of solidarity to Western academia and to Ukraine. So 3 meanings of solidarity I'd like to propose. Firstly, a good academic starts with a definition. The English word solidarity comes from the Latin solidum, via the French solide, which means whole or entire, adding together. But it's quite an expansive term. It can mean adding together an in-group, so like all Polish shipyard workers in 1980, or it can mean outreach from an in-group to an out-group, like British miners supporting Polish shipyard workers in 1980. For academics studying Ukraine, they're mainly the latter. Right? So I'm not Ukrainian. In Britain, we're not Ukrainians studying Ukraine. So we're from this kind of world where the subject and object are different. It's not Ukrainians studying Ukraine, but our job is to provide empathy, understanding, to unmute, to give Ukrainians voice, to recognize their subjectivity, to avoid Russian framings, which we're much less good at. I can't tell you how bored I am with starting every conversation with how many Nazis there are in Ukraine. Right. It's a circular conversation to begin on Russian terms, so avoid it. Also, taking the methods that we have already well developed to talk about our own selves, empires and colonies, French, British or whatever, hegemonic and subaltern peoples. So I'll quote the program for the Association of Slavonic and East European Studies this year, which is the main umbrella organization for Slavic studies in the West. The theme of this year's conference was decolonization. Decolonization is a profoundly political act of re-evaluating long-established and often intentional hierarchies of relinquishing and taking back power. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has led to widespread calls for the reassessment of Russo-centric relationships of power and hierarchy, both in the region and how we study it. So exactly that's what we do going forward. Decentering Slavic studies, making them more plural. That will require a lot of positive discrimination, because apart from parts of America, Canada, and London, there aren't many centres of Ukrainian studies, and mine isn't really a centre, but we are looking for sponsorship to make it such. And as much product and translation coming our way as possible. All right? Academics work off text, so the more Ukrainian words we have in English, the better for our students. Second meaning of solidarity. A nation is an imagined community. The millions of Ukrainians in the world are never going to meet all of the rest of the other Ukrainians, right? But according to academic literature, via this idea of imagined community, one Ukrainian recognizes another Ukrainian when they meet. So how? There are some cultural elements for sure, but the way I would say that most Ukrainians recognize other Ukrainians and differentiate themselves from Russians is this now substantive cliche of a Ukrainian political nation. With horizontal solidarity, self-organization, self-help, and increasingly a sense of being a citizen and not a subject with a state that's on your side, or at least more than it used to be. And this is how Ukrainians recognize Russians as different, right? Because they suffer under their arbitrary state with no care for ordinary Russians, a very radically atomized or enemy-suffering society. So Ukrainian identity is itself solidarity. Third meaning of solidarity. Vysyalan Belinsky in the 19th century, a Russian liberal, but basically above all a Hegelian, he said that Ukrainians would always be just a narod, a simple people, a parochial, stagnant non-civilization, with nothing to offer the Hegelian universal spirit of the age. Today I'd say the opposite is true. Ukraine is very Hegelian. It embodies the spirit of our times. Ukraine is more Western than many people in the West. Right? In the West we have too many posts. We're postmodern, we're post-Marshall. So Ukraine is the West without the post, in inverted commas. Ukraine is fighting a war that we don't want and are probably incapable of fighting ourselves. With ultra-modern weapons, sure, but with 19th century blood and soil in a very old-fashioned way. In the name of all of these solidarities, the Ukrainian armed forces fighting for their colleagues, for their own nation, but also for the territory and the values of Europe. That can sound cliched, but I think it's very real. So my answer would be yes, solidarity is the red thread that links us together.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Irina, I would ask you to reflect because
let me just catch up here.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Please.
In my understanding, solidarity is happening when something nasty is happening. We don't speak about solidarity when the things are going gloriously and everything is good and people are living in peace and prosperity. But we really need solidarity, and we somehow call for solidarity when people are in great troubles, when groups of the people, minorities or class groups are in great trouble. And we always appreciate, like humans, that we can bridge the gap between our own standing, our own life situation and others, and somehow to step in others people's shoes. In my understanding, what really has crushed any attempt to solidarity in Ukrainian society within the 20th century was Holodomor trauma. We have this very important, very telling, symbolic installation on this laid table with loaves of bread. And this speaks to Ukrainians in a particular symbolic way, surreptitiously, let's say. It's not exactly a positive sign. It's very often a sign of mourning for those who were starved to death within Stalinist biopolitics against his class enemy, but also against the national enemies who could somehow do harm to the Soviet project because they don't believe in it anymore and don't want to collectivize and don't want to pay for the industrialization with their lives and with the fate of their children. So when I think about how this capability of solidarity has been regained, I have to say that with Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity, we not only somehow resurfaced, rejuvenated our societal ability to empathize with each other, to feel each other's pain, and to be in our culture of togetherness and solidarity, but we also showed some examples. We bridged the gap between Ukraine and Poland, let's say, because Polish people, especially young, they were jealous of our students on the streets of Kiev during the Revolution of Dignity. They were saying solidarity is far behind. We would never have this golden term anymore. And here we really feel how the air is dense with human kindness. And sorry for quoting this in Russian, but it was overheard by a friend of mine. Какая охуенная доброта на улицах. This is something very telling. And when we think about this solidarity, it necessarily has to start from home. So my understanding is if in first, second, minutes and hours of the full-scale invasion, Ukrainians would not be capable of solidarity among themselves, not other countries, not other important humanitarian aids would aid, because we would quarrel inside and we would just defend each our own life and our own skin. But it was not the case, and this is very important. So the societal structure was having a kind of a premonition before the Russian aggression. I call this intuition of the victim. Me, being a literary scholar, a cultural scholar, I was very deeply involved through years 2000 and 2010 in educating Ukrainian society about the Holocaust trauma, which was not taught about and understood in the Soviet time, and to educating abroad when I was teaching on Ukrainian subject about Holodomor trauma, how it was present in society and how it was represented in literature, in film even, not only in the émigré milieu, but also inside the Soviet Union. But the code of talking about it or representing it was such to omit a censorship. So people were writing in such a way that when I had such an experience and you had such an experience, you will understand what I have in mind. It was prose. It was famous and very important movie by, which was of course forbidden by the Soviet censorship, by Yuri Ilyenko, Krynicя для спраглих, The Wheel of Thirsty, which is exactly like the next shelf metonymia for the hunger, because the thirst, you die of thirst even faster than from the hunger, but with the same pain, and you just could not stand when your relatives suffer, when your friends suffer, when your neighbors suffer, and you can help with nothing. So it was very important within the Soviet project not only produce unnecessary suffering en masse, but in a way to make everybody feel helpless. And in my understanding, Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine reversed the Nobel Prize for Svetlana Alexievich even before it was given. Because Alexievich project, with her ocean of voices recorded, with all these very nice and important tear-provoking stories, it's like everybody was suffering almost in equal share. And nobody is to blame, and nobody is to be brought to justice, because there is a trauma of victim, and trauma of perpetrator, and trauma of half victim, half perpetrator, and the vicious cycle of violence is going on and on. And what I would like to finish with, first of all, Ukrainians are withstanding the crimes against humanity in this war. But we are withstanding this, not losing our human face and our human heart. And this is something which is, I think, telling and understandable immediately for people of goodwill, for people who are for the discourse of the human rights and so on. So it's 21st century, it's not 19th century anymore. Another important imperial touch of that we have discussed today at the morning table with the group of people who are sitting here, that, for example, Russian teachers of literature and culture in our Soviet schools, they were referring to Pushkin and comparing him to Shevchenko. And you can easily guess who was bigger name and bigger literature, of course, Pushkin. But why? Because Pushkin was slave owner and Shevchenko was slave born. But it was never addressed as a question why Shevchenko was born slave. His grandparents were not slaves. And it was really, really important that Shevchenko has formulated something which I call to myself a Ukrainian negritude. Чорніше чорної землі блукають люди і там далі, хто вчив на пам'ять, той знає. So I can quote this in meters and kilometers. But why? Why Shevchenko is still actual? Not because Shevchenko was genius, but because Russian imperialism did not vanish. It is the same as it was in 19th century. And from here, this is bitter feeling among Ukrainians. So I think that on the first days of the big war, we interrupted our university studies because there was a visceral need to stand by those who were helplessly exposed to the horror of wars. In Lviv, we were like receiving so many refugees going from north, east and south of the country and flocking to the western border. So if that border would be closed at that moment, it would be the end of Ukrainian independence, but it would be the end of Ukrainian belief in the ideals or some virtues of their humanity. And I think for the world as such, it would be a very dark moment in history, a very dark. And I'm so happy that it didn't happen, that people at the other side of the border opened not only the border, but their hearts and their purses and their homes. And there were no refugee camps created for these multiple masses of Ukrainians, Ukrainian children, Ukrainian women, Ukrainian elderly, but actually they somehow dissolved into Polish society and then into other societies. That was crucial because if we did not have a rear, we could not sustain the front line of the fight. And most importantly, probably on the second week of the big war, my students called me and said, Pani Ireno, we feel like we want to have a little bit of teaching again because we want to have some schedule. We want that Monday would not be exactly like Wednesday and Wednesday not exactly like Thursday because it gives us a little normality, a bit of control, how actually the life is going on and the life is going on. And when I made my condolences on the first class, which we made online, and I said to them, my dear, we were not preparing you for such a world. I know you are so young and it's so unfair that you have to withstand such a big challenge. And they said, Pani Ireno, don't worry about us. We are probably even regretting that you are too old now to see how Ukraine will be when we will be your age. I promised to stay alive for a bit longer. So they said, we will fight this fight, we will win this fight, and we will make Ukraine into a real dream of our parents and grandparents and grandparents. So there is such an enthusiasm inside Ukrainian society that I think in our university situation, it's not only university professors are teaching students, but in these circumstances, students are teaching professors. Oh, great. Great.
So, does anyone wants to reflect of what you said? No? Because I have some follow-up questions, I guess, for most of you. Maybe Irina, we will, as you spoke the last, maybe we will start with you. And I overheard yours and Andrew's conversation this morning about the role of academia, the role of university, actually the mission in the society. And what you just described is again about this deep engagement of academic institution in broader society. You cannot for sure call it an ivory tower, as we have this image in our minds.
My question to my students was, in the second year of this big war, let's observe carefully what is created, what is born when everything else is in ruin or is about to be destructed. And when we think about the social texture, about the social impulses and energies and cultural energies which are just in the air, they are there. Sometimes we lack the matrix, we lack the proper framework how to describe it. So actually, when in the previous decades, Ukrainians were very attentive to some research programs or research agenda or family of topics which was coming from abroad. Now I think we are generating the family of topics ourselves, because we see how we lack language, how we lack description of what is going on and why. As you said before, 80% of Poles were not showing any interest in altruism. Why out of a sudden, out of the blue, they became altruists in their practice? So the cultural and social practice now is changing tremendously. And I would say the better side of the humanity is winning. And Russia has lost before it has started this war. Why? Because they were executing soft power for 29 to 32 years over Ukraine and over countries in the region. But we didn't buy that narrative. We didn't buy the narrative of Soviet nostalgia, because Ukrainians had a memory of gulags. And when Russians were happily soaking this even the very young people who never lived in the Soviet Union, especially those who were never living in the Soviet Union, they were prone to this narrative, как хорошо мы плохо жили, how nice our bad life was. But those who remember the dark side of the Soviet Union, they were asking, is it possible to be nostalgic about Soviet system? And even harsher question, is it moral to be nostalgic about the Gulag, let's say? Why it is not addressed for the face value, what it was, what a system, what anti-human system it was. And because of that, we also remember how many orphans Stalinism created, that actually 10,000 of orphans were placed in Ukraine already prior to the beginning of the Second World War. And unlike Russia, where Russian Federation was occupied only for 2% of its territory, Ukraine was occupied for 100%. And because of that, it experienced two atrocities. And people were very attuned, very attentive to how the big violence actually starts. And all this language of hatred and this language of othering the other in a very aggressive way, well, it was implanted into Ukrainian society, but not to the extent that Russia actually expected. And because of that, I really believe that there are some inherited or transgenerational structures of solidarity that still are present in our very damaged society. The society is recovering, and the narrative of the society is now tragedy into epic. Russia wanted to create another victim of Ukrainians in the 21st century. Ukrainians refused to become new victims. This is very important, because we were accused by many important authorities around the world that we are competing for the biggest victimage of the 20th century. No, it is not true. The current history is showing it is not true. And Ukrainians were saying, yes, the situation is very, very tragic. It's very on the brink of a big tragedy, but we will try to do our best not to make it into the tragedy, to find a solution. And I think this effort, societal effort, should be noticed, should be narrated, and should be represented in the future historical books as well.
Thank you, Irina. Andrew, would you like to reflect on this? Do you observe these changes Irina mentioned?
Well, British universities are a long way from the front line. We have done some things to help people escaping from the front line, or refugees, including students and refugee scholars. But I think the main change in how people like me deal with Ukraine is more public interest and public outreach. You know, so a skill ironically learned during lockdown. I put my lectures on YouTube this year. I do a lot of media. I do a lot of policy advice. Even the current government, even though I don't like them. It's double patriotism, British and Ukrainian. Doing my best for the country rather than the government. We'll have a new government soon. So we're a long way away, but there's very much heightened interest. And I guess people would prefer to ignore me. They'd much rather get it directly. So when Ukrainians come to Britain, cultural events, literary ones, etc., you know, there's much bigger interest than there used to be, but there still could be more.
Okay, thank you. And coming back to Tamara and what you said about your conversation with your American friends with journalism, I see some parallels with actually academic world, because academia has its own, frame, own, reasons to be agnostic about solidarity, and journalism. Well, maybe by nature, but definition is kind of a, cynical business.
Yeah.
That's solidarity is not what you expected working in a newsroom.
No, that's exactly right. Journalists, I was for many years a journalist, and then I switched hats and I ran NGOs. And at the time I said, I'm tired of being ironic. Journalists are always ironic. You're supposed to be detached, and you're not supposed to take sides. And I think you're supposed to fight all the time your feeling of solidarity. If you feel a feeling of solidarity, you're supposed to, slap it down. I think even so, journalists have been very taken by the spirit of the war. But, I think, and maybe I'll defend it. I don't like irony as a general principle, and I myself am not a very ironic person. But if you're going to tell the truth about something, you need to look at it objectively. And there are many truths, obviously, and in some ways, I feel as a journalist very literal-minded compared to some of the more artistic spirits on this panel. But to tell that literal-minded truth, you need to look at it like a doctor would look at something and tell the truth. So there's a downside to journalistic objectivity, shall we call it, irony, but there's also a valuable side. But the other thing I wanted to say in response to Edwin talking about Britain being far away, I was just in the United States for a couple of weeks, and one of my first is, again, my second visit home, really. And people are really far away. And it's very troubling. People are empathetic. Oh, Ukraine, nice, important fight. But Americans don't understand in some way that the world is a dangerous place. And they think even if it is a dangerous place, we've got these oceans, on both sides protecting us. And there was recently a sociological survey of Americans where it was actually split, it was compared to a year ago. A year ago, 80% said we should give humanitarian military aid, big number. It's now still 60%. That's a drop of 20 points. That's a big drop. And half and half. They asked them, should we stand with Ukraine as long as it takes, or should we urge them to settle as soon as possible? And the answers are half and half. It's like America is completely divided about that. And then, well, what? No, it's mixed. Some Republicans are more heavily like that, but there are plenty of Democrats like that. And I spent several days on Capitol Hill, and I ran into demonstrations from both sides. The far left is against the war, and the far right is against the war. And people in the middle are confused. But they don't, and again, back to this survey, only 40% think that Russia is a serious threat to the world. So, I mean, you have to worry about the politics, we all have to worry about Trump, we have to worry about Republicans, but I would say we have to worry about America being far away and a lack of solidarity. I mean, a kind of nominal solidarity, on the surface, of course, we're sympathetic to Ukraine, but how deep it goes, I think it's evaporating more quickly than much more quickly than I would like to see it evaporate, and something to put on the table in a conversation like this.
Okay, thank you. And before we give the floor to the audience, to the question, maybe Edwin and Anya, could you add something from Polish context about this, coming months and coming year, about what can be?
So it's difficult to predict anything. Now we know that as I said, the regime will change, and it's opened a lot of new opportunities, of course. And I believe that all this anti-Ukrainian turn by Polish government will be withdrawn. Yes, and then the new government will go back to good relations and also be kind of a partner in Ukrainian aspiration to join the European Union, because we should play this role, the same as Germany played this role when Poland were joining European Union, because the closest and the biggest neighbor who has an experience of this structure. So I think that all this will be cleared, but then there are some problems I see, because Tamar mentioned that in the US, thinking about the war is changing, and this far away, and so now important. In Poland is going the same situation. So we could look at during this political campaign last weeks, the war in Ukraine was one of the less important topic. So we forgot about it. But it's so close to us. But in public mind, it's not a real problem anymore. So it's something strange. I cannot explain this, how it happened, because...
Elections?
Sorry?
Election is a big
perhaps
topic.
Elections, but perhaps also lack of imagination, I am afraid, that we are still believing that we are safe because we are in NATO, yes? There are Americans who will always... guard us and so on. There are plenty of patriots in Rzeszów and so on. So you know, this kind of I would say a problem of imagination, because when we go back to the beginning of the war, and part of the answer why we were so involved and this solidarity was so huge, it was because we treated this war as ours. We believed that we also were attacked, not only Ukraine. It was very, let's say, in our bodies, that simply it was our wars. But now it's not anymore. So I don't know at what point it's exactly changed because of the success of Ukrainians in stopping invasion and so on. But anyway, it's kind of a problem. Another problem, and I am still facing it in Poland. So we discovered in our organization in the very beginning that we were very, let's say, interested in what's going on, as everybody, of course. And there was a lot of comments in media and so on. But we discovered that we are not interested what Ukrainians had to say about themselves. We had plenty of Polish experts who were describing what Ukrainians should think about their war and so on, but nobody was interested to ask Ukrainians what they were thinking and what were their goals of the war and so on. So we began the program Ukraine Speaks, so inviting Ukrainian guests, prominent intellectuals and so on, to explain what's going on inside Ukrainian society and what is the stake of the war, and so on. But almost nobody followed this idea, but quite simple, I would say. And it's another mystery for me. So why we are so not really interested in what really is going on in Ukraine, how Ukrainian society is being changed because of it. Because we can see that this revolution began, of course, during Dignity Revolution, but it's kind of a culmination now during the war, and that's a huge change. If you follow sociological studies, and so you can feel what's going on. And of course, on the street of Ukrainian cities, you can also feel that's what's changed. But to be honest, we are still referring to different stereotypes about Ukraine, but they are much more, let's say, effective in communication than real stories about what's going on. So once again, I cannot explain kind of laziness, perhaps, that it's easier to follow the old way of thinking. And sometimes we can see that still Russian propaganda, simply Russian propaganda, is still very effective. That because they refer to the stereotypes, to clichés, which were in use about corruption, for example. It's very strong meme about Ukraine, and it's very easy to mobilize it in public imagination. And it's.
My take is that, like Ukraine was and probably will be transitional country for Russian gas and oil, it was also a transitional country for Russian corruption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'm saying how some way of thinking are still very, let's say, embedded in that even reality, which is so, let's say, self-manifesting in an obvious way, cannot change this perception. But I hope that now that we also will try to change this, because in Poland it was also part of the problem of our inner political life, in our propaganda machine and so on. We cannot rely on the public media, for example, because it was very similar to Russian propaganda and so on. But when we, let's say, regain and control over public media, once again we can reconstruct the public sphere and communicate differently. So I have a lot of hope toward the future and in this field.
Thank you. I would agree with most of the things you said. It's very clear and great analysis, and I really do agree that Polish people will have a tendency to patronize Ukraine. And from the other point of view, there are many Polish experts about Ukraine, but 2 days ago I was taking a part in the discussion about the role of literature in Ukrainian, in depicting the country. It was during the Ukrainian Film Festival in Warsaw, and some people ask us from the audience, what about Ukrainians who speaks about Polish people? Are there many books about this? There are many experts who would like to describe Poland for us. Where are those reportages about Poland? We know that Poles writes about Ukraine, but Ukrainians do not write about Polish people. And it's interesting situation. What I see in contemporary culture, I see that Polish and Ukrainian culture is ready to have a new beginning, to have a new level of reflection. This culture is like a sphere with the long duration, that values are changing there, and we can see that those changes are first in culture, then in the society. And for me, like my favorite example about Ukrainian society is that during the Revolution of Dignity, first ministry that was occupied, it was Ministry for Education, and the second it was Ministry for Culture. And I really do believe that it is revolutionary in the global perspective, that Ukrainians know that culture is super important. But what I could add to this, younger generation is not ready for the stereotypes. Some of them, of course, have this rightist point of view, but they are creating the new order. They have the new value. And for example, once again, I will refer to this Warsaw Ukrainian Film Festival. The main award of about the documentary film won the film of Maciej Hamela, From Where and Where to. This is a documentary where he asked the cameraman to document people whom he brought from the eastern part of Ukraine to the Polish border. And there were many stories of people who were inside this minibus. These stories were basic stories. They were not stereotypes. They showed the people in their everyday living experience. And I was so happy to see something really fresh, with the fresh perspective, and the person who is who is the director and who does not observe how the eagle eats the poor child which is dying of hunger, but who is deeply involved, empathic, and understands that culture is also a field of politics and empathy, practical empathy. So I believe that what is solidarity? Solidarity is self-reflection, solidarity is being self-responsible, and solidarity is to make decisions.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, any questions from our audience? Now it's time to give you the floor. No? Huh?
Everything we said was so clear.
Yeah.
So obvious.
Yeah. Yeah, so any one of you would like to add some remarks at this point? So in this case, Irina, I'm sorry, I can't resist this, but I must borrow this quote from you. I would like to conclude with your phrase that the better angels of our nature are winning. Thank you for that, and thank you, all of you.